And for our last story today, the Dr. Seuss ruling seems to have been upheld. I really haven't read this, so let's go through it together. This is in the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. This is Lombardo versus Dr. Seuss from the Whose Holiday Limited Liability Company. On consideration whereof, it is hereby ordered, adjudged, and decreed that the judgment of the district court is affirmed. The district court in this case had ruled that Whose Holiday, plaintiff's play, did not infringe on Dr. Seuss's Grinch Who Stole Christmas. Dr. Seuss appeals from the September 15th, 2017 judgment granting plaintiffs a declaratory judgment that the play, Whose Holiday, did not infringe on their copyright and trademarks in How the Grinch Stole Christmas. We assume the party's familiarity with the underlying facts. The Copyright Act sets forth 4 non-exclusive factors to consider in determining fair use: the purpose and character of the use, the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount and substantiality of the portion used, and the effect of the use upon the potential market. And those are much more complicated than they sound, so you must read up on all 4 of them. While the factors are to be considered individually, in determining if a work is fair use, the factors are weighted together in light of the purposes of copyright. The first factor in a fair use inquiry is the purpose and character of the use, including whether such use is of a commercial nature or is for nonprofit educational purposes. The central purpose of this investigation is to see whether the new work merely supersedes the objects of the original or instead adds something new, with further purpose and different character, altering the first with new expression, meaning, or message. It asks, in other words, whether and to what extent the new work is transformative. That is a very important word, and it's a very hard topic to get. So if you do not understand what copyright transformation is, don't worry. Neither do most copyright attorneys. You really have to read up on this and understand exactly when you switch from using another's work in an unauthorized way or making your own out of it that makes it completely different in some way. That's a transformation of the work into a new copyrighted work. There's a million different examples. The famous one from here that I'll give you guys is that when Ethan and Ela Klein copy Matt Haas's video and make commentary about how he's oogling these girls and it's really projection about his psyche and all that, that ended up being, quote, a quintessential fair use, and that he could not sue them for copyright infringement because they copied parts of his video in order to make their criticism and commentary points. They were not copying his video just to copy his video. They were playing parts of his video to then make a criticism and commentary point. The purpose and character of the second video was different. And because it's different in this particular way, not just different at all, it has to be particularly different, that because the purpose and character is different and changed and everything, it became transformative. In this case, the transformation is because it's a parody. A parody has an obvious claim to transformational value, as it can provide social benefit by shedding light on an earlier work and in the process creating a new one. Here, the district court correctly determined that the play is a parody, imitating the style of the Grinch for comedic effect and to mock the naive, happy world of the Who's. The first factor weighs in Lombardo's favor. The second factor calls for recognition that some works are closer to the core of intended copyright than others, with the consequences being that fair use is more difficult to establish when the former works are copied. The second factor is rarely established in separating the fair use sheep from the infringing goats in a parody case, since parodies almost invariably copy publicly known expressive works. The district court thus properly accorded this factor little weight. The third factor looks to the amount and substance used of the original work. Here, attention turns to the persuasiveness of the parodist's justification for a particular copying done, and the enquiry will hearken back to the first of the statutory factors, as in prior cases, we recognize that the extent of permissible copying varies with the purpose and character of the use. In determining the third factor, the Supreme Court cautions, parody presents a difficult case. Parody's humor, or in any event its comment, necessarily springs from recognizable allusion to its object through distorted imitation. Its art lies in the tension between a known original and its parodic twin. When a parody takes aim at a particular work, the parody must be able to conjure up at least enough of the original to make the object of its critical wit recognizable. What makes for this recognition is quotation of the original's most distinctive and memorable features, which the parodist can be sure the audience will know. Once enough has been taken to assure identification, how much more is reasonable will depend on, say, the extent to which the work's overriding purpose and character is to parody the original, or, in contrast, the likelihood that the parody may serve as a market substitute for the original. But using some characteristic features cannot be avoided. Here, the play's use of material from the Grinch weigh in favor of fair use. While the play does use the Grinch characters, setting, plot, and style, it is in service of parody. The play does not copy verbatim or quote from the original, and while it does recount the plot, it does so to invoke the original. Thus, the district court properly weighed this factor in Lombardo's favor. The fourth considers the effect of the use upon the potential market for or value of the copyrighted work, and the enquiry must take account not only of the harm to the original, but also of harm to the market for derivatives. So this is probably the second most important factor. It's the fourth factor, but it's the second most important factor, and this is the market usurpation factor. If you are creating what you think is a fair use of the work, and you aren't considering the market for your work and how it overlaps with the market for your originals market, you're missing one of the factors. You have to consider the fourth fair use factor. Am I making use of their work to try and reach the same audience, to try and reach their people, to try and sell into their market? Am I taking a poster of a famous person and altering it ever so slightly in the hopes of reaching people who want to see that famous person? Then you're probably violating the fourth factor. If you are creating a derivative, your derivative needs to be so transformative that it's not also usurping the market. We agree with the district court's analysis that there is little likelihood of market harm. As the district court correctly concluded, each factor weighs in Lombardo's favor such that the play is fair use. Okay, well that did little to help us, so let me see if I can figure out what they mean. The fourth fair use factor in this case would mean that the Whose Holiday play would have to be seriously overlapping the market for the Dr. Seuss books and movies and such. No, they're not in the same market. People who are going to see an adult parody of The Grinch Who Stole Christmas are not necessarily the same people who are looking for children's books to give to their children. Now, is there some overlap? Sure, but that's why it's a balancing test and not a binary test. It's a balancing act of whether the author's, the secondary author's, the derivatives author's intent was to usurp the market, when they actually usurp the market is the more important part, but whether their intent and whether they actually usurp the market versus whether they are in a new market that does definitely overlap, and you can call into account. But for example, when Leonard French was a young child, Leonard French loved Dr. Seuss books. When Leonard French is an adult and goes to see Whose Holiday on and off as a Broadway production, that's not the same market. That's just because it's the same person does not mean that the Leonard French who's going to see Whose Holiday is in the market for buying Dr. Seuss books. What's different is that there's time separation there, or there's space separation, or there's literal market, like, they're different products or something like that. So that's what the court's talking about here, is that the markets are different. So we don't have a fourth fair use factor of market usurpation either in favor of the defendants. Finally, the district court properly granted judgment on the pleadings on trademark counterclaims, applying a balancing test from Rogers and Grimaldi, saying the Lanham Act should be construed to apply to artistic works only where the public interest in avoiding consumer confusion outweighs free expression. It concluded that free expression outweighs Dr. Seuss's interest in protecting trademarks. We agree, a parody must convey two simultaneous and contradictory messages: that it is the original, but also that it is not the original and is instead a parody. In this case, Lombardo evokes elements of the original work to serve his parodic purpose. The order of the district court is thereby affirmed. So, what do we think of that? That is, I think, the right call. I don't think I want to see parody law getting any stricter towards the parodic artist. I think parody is great and necessary, and I absolutely love the works of Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, and other parody artists over the years. Yeah, this is sort of like Sesame Street versus Avenue Q, and not Sesame Street versus Melissa McCarthy.
Isn't there a long history of protecting, like, raunchy and porn parodies of family-friendly things?
Yes. I don't know about how protected those are so much as there'd be just so much bad press if somebody went after one of those things. Imagine that the Disney sues porn parody company. Don't you think more people would go watch the porn parody then? It would be the Streisand effect.
That sounds like free advertising.
Yeah, well, some of these adult entertainment companies can afford it. I'm not too terribly worried about them. This, of course, is a community-supported channel. Thank you very much to our Patreon supporters for July. Kareem Harper has sponsored us for $500 at the $500 level. Thank you very much, Kareem, for your sponsorship. Really appreciate that. We have several $50 plus supporters. Thank you to Jonathan Doe, John Steele, Gavin Barnard, Evie, Andy, Kyle Mudrock, John H. Anderson, Vera Mentane, Sean McNamara, William Gonzalez, Michael Pierce, Terry Crisp, and Grunkle Tia Marie. And thank you to all the $5 plus supporters who have been scrolling on the LED panel behind me. And I'll find room to put you all on the crawl at the end of this thing. We usually do like a musical outro or some announcements or something like that. So thank you very much. Love you all. I am Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney. Thank you for joining me for this epic 3-hour live stream, and see you next week.
Hello. You're a puller, all right.
Yep. So when you walk her, try to just...
Oh, and we've got it. We shall shave.
Yep, you
Shave dog. Shave dog. You're a good girl. Look how happy to see your family. Yes, you are. Good girl. Come in. You want to come and see your family?
Be careful.
Gentle.
That's fine. You can lay down.
Lay down.
She does have a bandage for the IV catheter. You can wait an hour after you get home to remove it. You can just unravel it. If it starts bleeding again, just wrap it.
It was just a thing. And we get to go home now. See, it was just a thing.
No.
Hey.
Gentle. Now, son. Go, gentle. Lay down.
Gentle. Oh, girl.